who was in the hospital in Atlantic City. This is the first time that I've ever encountered this as a pastor. Something went wrong. He was dying. He was in the process of dying from pancreatic cancer. And as it was, he died. And they called blue coat or whatever it is, and they rushed in there and they brought him back to life. He was so angry. He said, "I want to die. You know, how dare you bring me back?" And for 3 days, his wife and I, we had to sign papers galore, and there was no living will. You see, and we had to get permission for them to unplug the plug. And that afternoon, Frank said, "I just want to go back where I was. You know, I don't want to come back here. I saw the Lord. I was in the presence of heaven." And so, on that afternoon, we shared together with Frank, and we were able to share together in the Lord's Supper. And then we stood by Frank and held his hands and sang wonderful hymns to the Lord. While the nurses came in, they were crying their eyes out, but Frank was so overjoyed. Within a matter of just what seemed less than a minute, everything flatlined and he was gone. But we could not move. It was such a holy moment. It was a moment when we knew that all of heaven invaded earth. And we knew that another great saint had passed to be with the Lord. I guess we could say heaven is simply out of this world. The Apostle John in the book of Revelation chapter 21 gives us a glimpse of how wonderful this place is that Judy has gone. The Apostle John writes and he says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, and it was prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, saying this, 'Now the dwelling of God is with men, and He will live with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them, and He will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' And He, that is Jesus, who was seated on the throne, said this, 'I am making everything new.' And then He said, 'Write this down. These words are trustworthy, and they are true.'" Last Thursday morning, no one expected that Judy would leave us. We all knew she was having some difficult weeks. But we all knew Judy was a fighter. She had been in the ring before and come back so many times. And we all, I think, expected she would pull through again. But one thing is certain, and the Bible tells us, that our birth and our death are recorded in God's book. They are not of our choosing. There's nothing I could have done. There's nothing any of you could have done. We might think, well, if I had only been there, maybe I could have changed. No, you couldn't. The Bible says there's a time to be born, and there is a time to die. And after that, it's appointed that there will be a judgment. So when God decides that it's time to pull the plug, He comes and He receives us home to Himself. This morning, as I was preparing to come to church, I happened to go on to my email, and there was a story someone sent me. I didn't plan on using this story in this message this morning, but as I read the story, the more I thought about it, I thought, wow, probably from heaven. Maybe Judy arranged to have it sent. I don't know. But it's titled, Just Checking In. A minister was passing through his church in the middle of the day. He decided to pause by the altar and to see who had come to pray. Just then the back door opened, and a man came down the aisle, and the minister frowned as he saw the man hadn't shaven in a while. His shirt was kind of shabby, and his coat was worn and frayed. The man knelt. He bowed his head, and then he rose and he walked away. And in the days that followed, each noontime came this chap. Each time he knelt down just for a moment, a lunch pail on his lap. Well, the minister's suspicion grew, and with robbery a main fear in his community, he decided to stop the man and ask him, "What are you doing here?" And the old man said he worked down the road. Lunch was half an hour. Lunchtime was his prayer time for finding strength and power. I stay only moments, see, because the factory is so far away. And as I kneel here talking to the Lord, this is kind of what I say. Lord, I just came again to tell you how happy I've been since we found each other and our friendship, and you took away my sin. Don't know much about how to pray, but I think about you every day. So Jesus, this is Jim. I'm just checking in today. The minister, feeling foolish, told Jim that was fine. He told the man he was welcome to come and pray just any time. Time to go, Jim smiled, said thanks, and he hurried to the door. The minister knelt at the altar as he'd never done before. His cold heart melted, warmed with love, and met with Jesus there. As tears flowed in his heart, he repeated old Jim's prayer. I just came to tell you, Lord, how happy I've been since we found each other's friendship, and you took away my sin. I don't know much of how to pray, but I think about you every day. So Jesus, this is me, Jim, just checking in today. Past noon one day, the minister noticed that old Jim hadn't come. As more days passed without Jim, he began to worry. At the factory, he asked about Jim, learning he was ill. The hospital staff was worried but he had given them a thrill. The week that Jim was with them brought changes in the ward. His smiles and joy contagious changed people were his reward. The head nurse couldn't understand why Jim was so glad. When after all no flowers, calls, or cards came, not a visitor he had. The minister stayed by his bed. He voiced the nurse's concern. No friends came to show they cared. He had nowhere to turn. Looking surprised, old Jim spoke up with a winsome smile. The nurse is wrong. She couldn't know that he's in here all the while. Every day at noon he's here, a dear friend of mine you see. He sits right down and takes my hand and leans over and says to me, I just came again to tell you, Jim, how happy I have been since we found this friendship and I took away your sin. Always love to hear you pray. I think about you each day. And so, Jim, this is Jesus, just checking in today. I think as Judy passed through these difficult days, she must have had many occasions to sit with the Lord and to talk with Jesus. Perhaps she said, Jesus, this is Judy, just checking in today. And then I heard as I spoke with Frank that Judy on Wednesday night was having a restless night, and so Frank was able to stay within